Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And I have so many things to read. I think I may actually do 2 videos today. We'll see how this goes, because I do have just a little bit more time this afternoon. But anyways, thank you all for tuning in. Only one person had an issue with me talking about punching people in the last video. I actually almost deleted that part, but I left it in because it was just how I was feeling in the moment. I thought I'd be like, here's just how I feel, I'll leave the reality in there for y'all. But notice that I did say I feel like punching people, not like I'm going to punch people. I don't think I've punched anybody since the 5th grade when I had some kind of, mashup on the playground or whatever. But yeah, I'm just, I'm not going to be running around punching people. Not yet, it hasn't reached that level yet. But also, this commenter also left a, left a comment referring to a nice liberal attitude, talking about punching people that disagree with you. And that's actually, so there's a lot in that sentence. And there's a lot in that statement that seems to be a topic of issue for a lot of people these days. Is the liberal left, becoming fascist? Is the, who's more fascist, the right wing or the left wing? I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting on some levels. On some levels, yes. Like the left is becoming, fascist in the sense that, they're saying you can't think this way, or you can't say these things or whatever. But what I think the right is trying to ignore is that their viewpoints, some of their viewpoints, not all of the viewpoints, but the viewpoints are stuck in a, I guess, in an older way of thinking. Like, it's the freedom to do whatever you want, even if it hurts people, kind of thing. And that's kind of really what the crux of the argument is. Like, well, I can say, I don't want to bow to these PC pressures because I want to be free to say or do anything I want, even if it hurts people. And so on some levels, I agree with the left in the sense that, the right to free speech is actually a right to hate speech, or let's not, maybe hate speech is a strong word. Maybe it's insensitive ideas, or not very evolved ideas. So, basically the right is saying we have the right to remain Neanderthals. We have the right to think dumb thoughts and say dumb things, even if they're totally stupid. So, do people have the right to say dumb things and think dumb thoughts? I don't know. This is a very important question, and this is a very important issue, because the world, is obviously, in order for the world to evolve or to go forward or to progress, we have to move on to, higher levels of thinking. And hierarchy is a thing that exists in all of nature, and it exists in all of humans, in the human race. It exists, but we, in our quest for equality or egalitarianism or whatever, in our quest for that, we we argue that everyone has a voice, or, you know, no one is less than another, right? So there's, you know, so there's two different things that are straining on each other. There's the actual hierarchy of life and nature, you know. Some things are more powerful than others. Some things have more value, if you want to say that, than other things. And then there's the quest for equality and fairness, which says that everything has value and all things have value. And that's, you know, that's just my philosophical question for the day. Do all things have value? Do, you know, you know, on a humanitarian level, yes, right? Like no one is less than another. No one is, you know, things that some people denote as less valuable are actually quite valuable to those that think those things, or have those things, or practice those things, or use those things to live, whatever they may be, right? In industrial civilization, we don't value, you know, living in an agricultural lifestyle. We, you know, a lot of people are like, why would I want to do that? Why do I want to grow my own food? Ew, yuck. Bugs, nasty. Dirt, oh, nobody wants to be dirty. Like, you know, we all want to, you know, most people want to live in cities and be clean and have showers and, you know, drive cars and have money, blah, 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 blah. And if you try to tell somebody that that's bad, or, you know, don't do that thing, they're going to look at, they don't have a space in their mind for comprehending what you're talking about. They'll just be like, what the hell, man? Like, why would I, you know, like, shut up would be their answer. Like, no. So yeah, you know, this is an interesting, we've got ourselves into this, you know, this Gordian knot of values or morality or whatever you want to call it in our current culture, because we have people saying, you know, don't tread on me because you think less of me or because you think I'm not valuable. And then we have people that are, you know, don't tread on my freedom to think whatever it is I want to think about you or do whatever it is I want to do. You know, libertarianism is a perfect example of, like, just basically, like, our country was founded on piratism, basically, right? You know, oh, look over there, we're going to go get, there's this stuff and it's free. Oh, don't mind that there's people there. You know, it's free, it's ours, we can go take it. We're going to go get it. We're going to do whatever we need to do to prosper and live and, you know, be fruitful and multiply, or whatever, you know, Christianity has to tell people. But, right, you know, so that's basically, you know, it isn't, and capitalism basically relies on some form of piratism, right? We are constantly extracting resources and we're putting value on these resources, but how did we get these resources? Where did they come from? You know, you know, nowadays companies have to maybe pay for the rights to get these resources, or pay for access to these resources. But back in the day, they didn't have to pay for these. They just, you know, there's a pool of black stuff over there, and you know, we think it's oil, so we're just gonna go get it. We're just gonna go get it because it's ours. And so that's, you know, the libertarian mindset, or and you could call that almost a conservative mindset as well. Is it like, you know, don't tread on my ability to just go take whatever I want, or get whatever I want, or do whatever I want. And no, you can't. There are limits, and so, you know, we want to say, oh, only nature can, you know, describe those limits, not other people, blah, 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 you know, the endless debate. But anyways, I'm just to wrap this little rant up. I'm not going to punch anybody anytime soon, because I actually don't think, you know, I will delete the trolls that are being stupid. But, you know, if somebody wants to know about something, or the comment I read yesterday, some people pointed it out that it had some climate denier kind of connotations. And if that comment was coming from a denialist standpoint, it was extremely well thought out and had some science behind it. Do I agree with it or do I believe it? I don't, I don't know. I'm just not really, I'm not going to say either way whether I agree or believe it. It's one theory. But, if that was a denialist standpoint on some level, and I don't think that it was, because they weren't saying that, climate change wasn't happening. They weren't saying that CO2 release wasn't happening. They were saying that, different factors were involved in what was going to transpire in the future, or that climate change could tip us into an ice age and not into a hothouse. Anyways, I completely appreciated the well thought outness of that and the science behind it, and the fact that they, took some time to argue something with some kind of thought and evidence behind them. So, I'm always willing to entertain evidence and thought, but it's just, and here's another point that I wanted to make. We agree that something should be done, although many think it's too late and why do it anyways, or why bother, enjoy yourself, go ahead, live your life. But for the most part, I think many people on this channel think that we have a chance to make some impact, if there's a possible road forward, that we should, be making strides to get going on that path, as soon as possible, because we don't have time. And I'm in that camp. But what I would like to say is, what is, in the whether you believe or deny in climate change, are either of those things having much of an impact on climate change, and that's, that's another one for the people who are in the we are so fucked camp, and the, people who are in the hopium camp. I actually exist in both camps at the same time, and you can too. But is believing in climate change, is it actually fixing much? I don't know. I don't know that it is. You have to actually do something about it, and you have to do it in a very, very impactful and pretty grand manner in order to do something about it. So I'm going to read a little article about that I thought was interesting. I don't, we can pick this one apart. There's a lot I don't believe or I don't agree with in this, but it's interesting nonetheless. I have not been timing this, and I apologize because I have no, I've had a lot of caffeine, and now I have no idea how long I've been talking for. This is from Zero Hedge. Don't knock the source. I actually like Zero Hedge. This article is called Berkeley Scholar Admits Climate Change Has Run Its Course. And actually, I think this is from it's from the Wall Street Journal. So, it's not from Zero Hedge. It's reprinted, reposted from the Wall Street Journal. Climate change is over. No, I'm not saying that climate will not change in the future or that human influence on climate is negligible. I mean simply that climate change is no longer a preeminent policy issue. All that remains is boilerplate rhetoric from the political class, frivolous nuisance lawsuits, and bureaucratic mandates on behalf of special interest renewable energy rent seekers. Judged by deeds rather than words, most national governments are backing away from forced marched decarbonization. You can date the arc of climate change as a policy priority from 1988, when highly publicized congressional hearings, Jim Hansen, first elevated the issue to 2018. President Trump's ostentatious withdrawal from the Paris Agreement merely ratified a trend long becoming evident. A good indicator of why climate change as an issue is over can be found earlier in the text of the Paris Agreement. The non-binding pact declares that climate action must include concern for gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity, as well as the importance for some of the concept of climate justice. Another is Sarah Meyer's address at the most recent meetings of the American Geophysical Union, in which she proclaimed that climate change cannot fully be addressed without also grappling with the misogyny and social injustice that have perpetuated the problem for decades. I'm going to say that's true. The descent of climate change into the abyss, this is another link. The descent of climate change into the abyss of social justice identity politics represents the last gasp of a cause that has lost its vitality. Climate alarm is like a car alarm, a blaring noise people are tuning out. This outcome was predictable. Political scientist Anthony Downs described the downward trajectory of many political movements in an article for the Public Interest, Up and Down with Ecology, the Issue Attention Cycle, published in 1972, long before the climate change campaign began. Observing the movements that had arisen to address issues like crime, poverty, and even the US-Soviet space race, Mr. Downs discerned a 5-stage cycle through which political issues pass regularly. The first stage involves groups of experts and activists calling attention to a public problem, which leads quickly to the second stage, wherein the alarmed media and political class discover the issue. The second stage typically includes a large amount of euphoric enthusiasm. You might call it the dopamine stage, as activists conceive the issue in terms of global peril and salvation. This tendency explains the fanaticism with which divinity school dropouts Al Gore and Jerry Brown have warned of climate change. Then comes the third stage, the hinge. As Mr. Downs explains, there soon comes a gradual spreading realization that the cost of solving the problem is very high indeed. That's where we've been since the United Nations Traveling Climate Circus committed itself to the fanatical mission of massive near-term reductions in fossil fuel consumption codified in unrealistic proposals like the Kyoto Protocol. This third stage, Mr. Downs continues, becomes almost imperceptibly transformed into the fourth stage, a gradual decline in the intensity of public interest in the problem. While opinion surveys find that roughly half of Americans regard climate change as a problem, the issue has never achieved high salience among the public, despite the drumbeat of alarm from the climate campaign. Americans have consistently ranked climate change the 19th or 20th of 20 leading issues on the annual Pew Research Center poll, while Gallup's yearly survey of environmental issues typically ranks climate change far behind air and water pollution. In the final stage, Mr. Downs concludes, an issue that has been replaced at the center of public concern moves into a prolonged limbo, the twilight realm of lesser attention or spasmodic recurrences of interest. Mr. Downs predicted correctly that environmental issues would suffer this decline because solving such issues involves painful trade-offs that committed climate activists would rather not make. Boom. That sentence right there is a boom. And that is the difficulty in, probably one of the biggest difficulties in relaying the necessity of changing your whole lifestyle and fighting climate change, is that it's difficult to change your entire lifestyle and still relate to the people that you're talking to. Right? You know, if you actually, you know, plenty of people are living other lifestyles, alternate carbon low lifestyles, but they can't, you know, they're not on Facebook every day and they're not out in the world doing the things with everybody else, right? So it's, you know, unless you are directly impacting people on a personal level, and you probably are, you're not going to have the megaphone or the interest of people that are doing all the industrial civilization things, right? So I'm always thinking about that. Like, I'm kind of in industrial civilization on some level. Like, I'm doing all the things that everybody else is doing. But every time I say climate change, people are like, okay, is he going to keep talking about this? Because we got things to do. And this is harshing my, you know, my high, bro. Anyways, scientists who are genuinely worried about the potential for catastrophic climate change ought to be the most outraged at how The left politicized the issue and how the international policy community narrowed the range of acceptable responses. Treating climate change as a planet-scale problem that could be solved only by an international regulatory scheme transformed the issue into political creed for committed believers. Causes that live by politics die by politics. And I have an issue with that last sentence because that's bullshit. All of life is political. We're all political. The problem with politics is that people think that it's something that's outside of whatever else that it is you're doing. Even if you live in a commune, you are involved in politics with the people around you. Politics is a part of, how you solve problems and organize things so that things can get better, right? You cannot live politic free. Every family has politics, so it's difficult because people are involved in doing, living their daily lives. But, politics is all important. Politics is your life. If you don't involve yourself in politics, you take yourself out of the game of, figuring out what's best for you and yours and your loved ones. Play the game if you can. Anyways, moving on. So somebody also a few days ago left me a comment about climate change as related to volcanoes or to shifting tectonic plates, and it was a valid comment. And I because I made a remark that volcanoes were kind of part of the whole, and they are part of the whole. There are our system is an interlocking system. It is a web. So everything affects everything. You can't, it's hard to, specify each of these little problems, and, you want to put them in a box and you want to study them in and of themselves, but everything is related, of course. So, and here we go. Here's an article from 2013. Rising sea levels might promote increased volcanism. People love to associate climate and volcanoes, and they want volcanoes to do all sorts of stuff to climate and vice versa. Just check out these recent headlines. Alaska Dispatch, how to reverse global warming, mimic volcanic eruptions. And Paul Beckwith has mentioned ideas like this as well. Atlantic Wire, Earth's forecast looks warm and full of volcanic eruptions. I mean, honestly, what can't volcanoes do? I find it amusing how easily the complex interaction between climate and volcanism is boiled down to something sensational when the doom isn't even there. I have already tackled why man-made volcanic eruptions aren't our solution to a warming climate. However, I haven't touched the idea that as the climate warms, we should expect more volcanic eruptions. Could this be possible? I have to admit, when I first saw these headlines regarding a new paper in geology by Stefan Kudderolf and others, I was highly skeptical. It has been suggested before that as you unload a volcanic region from a large ice cap, then we sometimes see increased volcanic activity. This is due to the lowering of pressure of the mantle rocks below the volcanic region, which enhances melting. Evidence of this has been seen in Iceland and in Cascades of North America, the Cascades. However, that seems limited. How many volcanoes are currently buried under thick, I'm talking kilometer thick, ice caps? Iceland and Antarctica are the most likely places, but in the grand scheme of global volcanism, that isn't too many volcanoes. How could the current warming climate of the planet produce much additional volcanism? Well, it actually has a surprisingly elegant answer. Kudderolf and others looked at ash deposits in ocean sediment that recorded upward of 1 million years of sedimentation in the oceans. These drill cores they examined were from offshore volcanically active regions like Central America, the Philippines, and Japan. By dating the ash layers using a variety of methods, they could look to see if the number of VEI5 or greater eruptions that would send ash over the ocean to be deposited varies with any type of cycle. Interestingly, they found that there does not appear to be a correlation between the amount of VEI 5+ eruptions and the 41 KY Milchankovic obliquity frequency. Ooh, that was a mouthful. For the most recent sediment. The dating can become more problematic with older sediment. This 41 KY obliquity is a cycle based on the tilt of the Earth's poles from 22.5 to 24.5 degrees. And as the obliquity changes, the climate also changes, so that ice volume decreases and sea level increases as climate warms. However, the peak volcanism trailed behind the highest rates of sea level change by around 4,000 years. Why might that be? This comes down to geodynamics. Think about a tectonic plate like a plank of wood. The ocean overlaps one end of the plank and the other end is fixed to the ground, the interior of the tectonic plate. As sea level rises, the weight on one end increases, causing the plank to bend. So pressure goes up at the end, but down in the middle where the plank bends upward, see sketch above. Now, rocks don't equilibrate instantly. Having problems today. So imagine the mantle behind that bending plate is feeling that decrease in pressure. The result will be an increase in magma production, but not at exactly the same time as the sea level changes. This effect might be enhanced in plates without a very rigid continental plate, such as Central America, as opposed to the Cascades. And what are we seeing right now? Why is this cool? Well, it means that you don't need an ice cap to have a warming climate produce more volcanism. Now, before you jump off the deep end of our plank, Cutter off and others really don't tackle the big question: how much more volcanism occurs during these periods of increased sea level? It is apparently enough to be statistically significant in the sediment record, but likely not enough to cause massive global catastrophe. Even doubling the rate of VEI-5 eruptions, which would require a significant increase in magma production, isn't likely to have a profound singular effect on global climate, as the eruptions are distributed through timescales of thousands of hundreds to thousands of years. Thousands to hundreds of thousands of years. Even so, the change in sea level that warming climate today might cause isn't likely to be manifested in increased volcanism until, around 6000 AD. So by the time those eruptions might start, we may be far beyond needing volcanism to cool the climate. All right, just thought that was interesting. Thank you to whoever linked that for me. I can't remember and I apologize. If anybody knows who Cliff High is, and if you're a follower of Cliff High, so Cliff High thinks, or is saying, that we're in our galaxy is in some kind of trajectory, which is increasing the heat of the sun, and because the sun is increasing in heat, the core of our Earth is increasing in heat, and that somehow that'll lead to some geological things happening, but then he also says that somehow we're going to flip into an ice age, and I don't understand how that actually how that mechanism is going to work. If the sun's getting hotter and the Earth is getting hotter, and then we flip into an ice age, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe there is some kind of grand mechanism in which that could happen. We may not be here to see that or know what that mechanism is. Moving on. I think I'm going to read this one more article, and then I'm going to probably come back and do another video, because I don't want to fill up one video. I don't want to have like an hour-long video. This is interesting. I actually saw something about this a week or two ago, and I didn't Didn't have time to stop and read it, but this looks like an interesting idea as well. Climate change killed the aliens, and it will probably kill us too. New simulation suggests. Did climate change already kill all the aliens we've been searching for? According to astrophysicist Adam Frank, it's certainly a possibility, and whether humans are doomed to the same fate may already be out of our hands. Frank, a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Rochester, New York, is the lead author of a new paper published May 1 in the journal Astrobiology that aims to take what Frank calls a 10,000 light-year view of anthropogenic human-caused climate change. Using mathematical models based on the disappearance of a real-life lost civilization here on Earth, the former inhabitants of Easter Island, Frank and his colleagues simulated how various alien civilizations might rise and fall if they were to increasingly convert their planet's limited natural resources into energy. Who does that sound like? The laws of physics demand that any young population building an energy-intensive civilization like ours is going to have feedback on its planet, Frank said in a statement. Seeing climate change in this cosmic context may give us better insight into what's happening to us now and how to deal with it. The results, as you might expect, were generally pretty grim. Of 4 common trajectories for energy-intense civilization, 3 ended in apocalypse. The 4th scenario, a path that involved converting the whole alien society to sustainable sources of energy, worked only when civilizations recognized the damage they were doing to the planet and acted in the right way. The last scenario is the most frightening, Frank said. Even if you did the right thing, if you waited too long, you could still have your population collapse. Wah, wah, wah. 3 paths to apocalypse. For Frank, the path to modeling an apocalypse starts with Easter Island. Easter Island presents a particularly useful example to our own purposes, since it is often taken as a lesson for global sustainability. Frank and his colleagues wrote in the paper, many studies indicate that Easter Island's inhabitants depleted their resources, leading to starvation and termination of the island's civilization. Starvation, termination, civilization. Working from previous equations that modeled the fall of Easter Island's population, alongside the depletion of its resources, the team found 4 possible endpoints of the hypothetical alien civilization similarly constrained by limited natural resources. And there's some graphs here. All right, yeah. Only one graph shows sustainability, but the planetary temperature actually rises quite a bit. The first trajectory we found is what we call the die-off, Frank said. In the scenario, the civilization's population skyrockets over a short period of time. And as the aliens guzzle energy and belch out greenhouse gases, the planet's temperature spikes too. In this study, temperature was used to represent human-made impacts on the planet's habitability via greenhouse gas pollution. The population peaks, then suddenly plummets as rising temperatures make survival harder and harder. The population eventually levels off, but with a fraction of the people who were around before. Imagine if 7 out of 10 people you knew died quickly, Frank said. It's not a clear, complex technological civilization. It's not clear a complex technological civilization could survive that kind of change. Sorry. The second scenario is sustainability. Here, both the planet's population and its global temperature climb rapidly, but then level off when the civilization recognizes how its resource management is affecting nature. To reach an equilibrium, Frank said, the population would need to switch from resources that take a high toll on the planet, like oil, to more sustainable resources, like solar energy. Civilization is saved. Both the third and fourth scenarios are called collapse. Here, as in the die-off scenario, both planets' population and the planet's temperature rise dramatically over a short period. But this time, when people start dying from lack of basic resources, there are no survivors. Whether a civilization merely dies off or totally collapses depends on how sensitive the environment is and how quickly it responds to rising populations. Even if the civilization realizes it's damaging the environment and makes attempts to switch to sustainable resources, a scenario called collapse with resource change, it's too late. The civilization might see a temporary slowing in the population decline, but eventually it drops to zero anyway. The damage is done, civilization is doomed. Act now while civilization lasts. The difference between a sustainable future and a deadly collapse was largely dependent on a population's foresight, how soon they realized they were destroying the planet, and how quickly they took action. According to Frank, this difference should motivate humans to take climate change seriously. Across cosmic space and time, you're going to have winners who managed to see what was going on and figure out a path through it, and losers who just couldn't get their act together and their civilization fell by the wayside, Frank said. The question is, which category do we want to be in? And the question is, if you want to be in the category that saves yourself, then you have to actually have to figure out a way to get the people that are keeping you in stupid land out of your way, right? Climate deniers are in stupid land. You have to find a way to go forward as a whole population, whether you're trying to change people's minds or not, right? There comes a point where it's like, we don't have time to debate. There's no debate, for one thing, and we don't have time to change people's minds. Even with, large social movements, there were always different prongs of the movement. There were people who were philosophically, putting forward why we need this change. And there were people that were actually going out and saying, we're going to change this now, right? One of my favorite quotes is from Martin Luther King when he says, I want to get the language right. And I really like that quote, because what he's saying is you're not going to change anybody's mind unless you are convincing in your language, unless you are getting your language right. But that wasn't the only thing. If people gaining civil rights just depended on language, they would just say like, hey, you guys, this is unfair. And everybody would, and white people would be like, oh, really? Oh, yeah. You're right. It is unfair. That wasn't what happened. What happened was, you had leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King saying, here's how dumb this is. And then, and they also actually had to go, stop things from happening. You had to boycott things. You had to put yourselves in the streets. You had to shut down businesses. You had to shut down cities. You had to call so much attention to this problem. You basically had to go out and say, no, this isn't going to happen anymore. And so, in the same sense, in the sense of climate change, we can talk about this all day long, but until somebody's going to put their bodies in the way, this isn't going to happen anymore. Nothing's going to change. And you're going to have to put yourselves in the way of climate deniers. And whether that's a liberal ideology or not, or whether it's, whatever, whether liberals have to go punch deniers in the face or not, it might actually get to the point where, like, who gives a fuck, right? You're a dumbass and you're getting in the way. Your stupidity is killing people. So you don't get to keep on killing people with your dumbness, right? So either get out of the way or get punched in the face, one of the two, or die in a mass die-off with everybody else. So, your choices are bad, figure it out, or, have bad things happen to you. Those are your choices. Figure it out or have bad things happen to you. Consequences or ascension. That's all I have for this video. I'm going to come back with one more. Thank you all for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to donate to this channel, you can do so at the links below. Thank you all for your wonderful donations already. I appreciate you very, very much. All right. Peace.